Welcome to Idea to Investment, the podcast where we dig into the exciting world of entrepreneurship and investment. We tell the stories of tech creators doing innovative work and the investors who back them up. Along the way, unveiling the fascinating journey of an idea to scoring crucial investment, we'll highlight the voices of entrepreneurs, showcasing their grit and creativity while gaining insight from the investors who lead to those dreams. Get ready to be inspired, stay informed, and stay tuned as we explore the awesome collision of ideas and investments. Idea to Investment is sponsored by TD Ferrera Wealth Advisory Group.
Hi, I'm Danielle Graham, General Partner of Phoenix Fire and co-founder of the Firehood. We're on a mission to support the participation, leadership, and prosperity for women in technology. Phoenix Fire is the angel fund, where we have a typical LPGP structure, and the Firehood is the Women's Angel Network, where women from across Canada invest in women from across Canada.
Incredible. Well, thanks so much for joining us today and taking the time to have this really important conversation. We'll dive into your background and your journey into the investment world. And so in giving some thought to that, Danielle, I know you're a bit of a globetrotter as well. Do you want to start by telling a little bit, our listeners a little bit about what encouraged you to go from having an educational background in history to pursuing entrepreneurship and then launching a platform that is helping other Canadian businesses and women in particular?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm happy to, share my personal history. I was born in Vancouver, but I grew up across Africa, in Southern Africa and Ethiopia and Eastern Africa. My parents work in international development. So I was exposed to programs focused on women's microloans, especially in Southern Ethiopia, that really inspired me at a young age in my teenage years, where I just saw their ability to succeed by investing in themselves and their ideas that no one else could come up with. And I really liked that model, and I knew that I would be passionate about it for years. So I was always interested in entrepreneurship, but I come from an all arts family background. And so there was a lot of encouragement to continue on that path, And so once I finished my Master's of Arts, I knew that I wanted to get into entrepreneurship. I still was, that extroverted person that and I couldn't stand the idea of living in a library doing a PhD. So, maybe one day, but for now, I just wanted to be part of the world and entrepreneurship. So I moved to Waterloo, and that's where I built Fierce Founders. And I was so much more comfortable with the idea of women-specific programming because I'd seen the success, and I knew what that targeted approach could mean for building community, and that entrepreneurship and innovation and disruption, it's so subjective. So we needed everyone in the ecosystem, and it was such a homogenous ecosystem at the time. So I was ready to take on that change, and I was just a co-op when I started. So the growth and success of what happened with Fierce Founders just kept me kind of, in a way, addicted to the tech ecosystem and supporting women entrepreneurs.
And so then when you fast forward to where you are today with Phoenix Fire and the Firehood, what was part of the reason behind starting that? I mean, you've talked a little bit about your experience internationally and women's programming, and how you had the great opportunity to build Fierce Founders that continues to be a major player in the ecosystem. But when I think of Phoenix Fire and the Firehood, and I think of women investing and women investing in women, it's your brand that comes to mind immediately for me. And I know it's a younger brand. It's not like you've been around for 10 years. So talk to us about the reason behind that and more of the journey that you've been on.
Yeah, I think we're just coming up to our 3rd year anniversary. Wow. So but it's a lot of longer term passion between myself and my co-founder, Claudette McGowan. We actually started in parallel while she was working on the Black Arts and Innovation Expo, just a few months before I started Fierce Founders. Wow. So we were in parallel until we both worked on the Black Innovation Fellowship together. So we've always been more at that forefront of, well, where can we instigate? Where is there a gap? Where is there value that we can add? Because we see the gaps, and that's what any entrepreneur would do. So the reason why I started Phoenix Fire and the Firehood, especially with Claudette McGowan, is because there was a gap. We didn't see the opportunities for early stage founders, and there's still a massive gap. There's so much more room to play because entrepreneurs in the early stages need those champions, need those people who can put their money where their mouth is, support them with operational support, advisory, mentorship, true leadership, and put their checks in those bank accounts to grow. Women are over mentored and underfunded. So it's that combination that's so powerful. And that's why when I was kind of starting out with boot camps and accelerators, I veered into the venture capital side and learned directly from so many incredible mentors in Toronto. Just immersed myself for several years because I knew that that is a valued skill set and a nice niche where my kind of skills can overlap with what's needed. And so I'm always driving towards that. So really appreciate that you can see kind of our brand. We do tend to be a little more flashy at tech conferences, wearing our fiery outfits and standing on stage making big announcements. But I've been part of those conferences for years, so I saw when they had such small numbers of women, almost all males, right? All male panels. And again, also from a intersectional standpoint, where do newcomers, refugees, people with disabilities, LGBTQ plus, Black and people of color come into the picture for Canada that's so multicultural and has all this rich diversity, global perspectives that want to be here but aren't being included, aren't on cap tables. So we've been talking about, boardroom tables for so long. There's a new table in the block.
I love it. And I've heard before, because of the connection that we fostered, you say over-mentored and underfunded, and I say that all the time. We're totally synergistic on that. And I also have such alignment when I think about the work that we do at Tech Alliance, and I think about your personality and your intention, your authentic approach to intersectionality and widening pathways for founders that should be included. And that when we think about sort of technology sector of 5-10 years ago, and when we look at the future, those two things are very, very different. And I really do believe, and here comes the pun that's intended, that it's the trailblazing that happens. And even when there's splash and color, the truth of your brand is so authentic and so deeply felt and held by folks who are part of the work that you do or have that connection to you. I love what you said about sort of the overlapping of your experience. And when you think of co-founding the Firehood and Phoenix Fire with Claudette, what are the ways that your superpowers and her superpowers overlap to create an even more dynamic outcome for your founders?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think you can tell that I'm on the ground in not only in Canada, but I spent the last month in Rome, Dubai, Colombia, Vancouver, and the exotic locale of Ottawa. But we are such a great combination. I mean, for me, her leadership, her skill set, her knowledge, you should spend the most time with people who you want to become like. And so I kind of honed in on her as an entrepreneur early on, because that's actually my skill set is, finding that little, entrepreneurial spark early on and believing in people before others do. And then just holding on to that for a long time. And I'm seeing that too with a lot of the fierce founders who are early on in our programs, but I knew they were smart and capable, and now they're coming back as angels. So always honed in on that. So for me, Claudette was so emblematic of that, and her integrity, her intelligence, her emotional awareness, and her ability to be in every room. So I don't have to. I can spend my time hanging out with all the entrepreneurs and angels and conferences, and she's up there in the boardrooms of Sick Kids and Mars and Air Canada. And it's fabulous because our networks are each other's networks now, and they're all the Firehood's networks as well. So it really passes on to the founders to add so much value.
Well, and that's that flywheel effect, right? If you're in the right places, having the right conversations, and you're opening up opportunity for the founders in your portfolio, really the benefit is to the ecosystem, to the founders, and certainly to the future growth of the Firehood and Phoenix Fire. I'm curious too, reflecting back on your own journey, and thinking about your background, what would you say are the influencers for your own investment philosophy and working with founders?
I think founders inspire me the most every
Yeah.
day. You know, even after all my travels, I'm like back in the grind, day to day, you know, hearing pitches, pull up those decks. Like it just gives me so much energy. And I think that's also where I was talking about that intersection, right? For people in their careers to realize, like, hey, I am a natural extrovert. So why waste my talent in a library, right? Yes, I wanted to be an academic. Yes, I wanted to spend so much time thinking through things, but I did that, and that's why that's what I think you can see coming through in our strategic work and the layers of what we want to offer and what's coming next. So the entrepreneurs, for me, are the ones who are solving the problems.
Hmm.
And I want all of these problems to be solved. Can we just fix, you know, climate change? Can we just solve cancer? Like, I just want those
Yeah,
things to
big
be
stuff.
over in the world. And these are the people who figured out and have dedicated their lives to those particular problems. And it's way easier for me to teach them in a few weeks how to build out a pitch deck in a data room than it is for them to get a PhD in neuroscience.
Hmm.
And so I respect them so much for the hard work and narrow focus of their dedicated work that will solve those problems. And how can I enable that? And if all of that I need to do is that kind of connection point, and that's my skill set, then it's a perfect combination. So that's really where I've kind of honed in on and continued to be inspired. Um, and that's why I know that I can dedicate my entire career to this.
I think you would have been a really incredibly disruptive librarian, just, for the record. As a natural
Yeah.
innovator, I can imagine that libraries all over the world would change if you had followed that path. But boy, oh boy, I'm so excited that the world, Canada and the world, has the opportunity to be connected to you in the way that you are operating now and the way that you're disrupting and bringing people together. It's, imagine the world if Danielle was a librarian. I think it'd be a really cool place. But imagine the world when Phoenix Fire and the Firehood continue to take off and have that greater vibration and greater impact. I mean, that's a really cool future to look forward to.
I like the vibration, you know, like
Yeah.
vibes, energy that comes up in so many of my conversations and authenticity. And that's also what founders need to find within their pitch. You know, we had one company at Elevate that was like, I'm a farmer's daughter and I'm the bug lady, you know, and I think you even know who I'm talking about. And she said that in front of us, and then she said it on stage. And she was so like humble and shy about it too, where she was like, oh no, I made a fool of myself. It's like, no, that is what resonates. That is the
Mm-hmm.
authenticity. That's what people are investing in because they know you now, right? Don't hide behind
Absolutely.
big words and photos and, you
Yeah.
know, numbers. Like tell your story because that's the early stages that are going to showcase the long-term commitment
Well, and
to.
I think too, when there's that kind of declaration about who they are, it's really attractive, particularly when it relates to investors finding a niche. So when you think about first meeting with founders and when you have invested in a company and there's that continued relationship development, business relationship development, and personality development for you, what are the things that can make or break that connection between the founder and the investor, whether that's an experience with founders that you've had or just in general? Feel free to hone in or be general about that.
I would say, like, if you look at what are the qualities you look for in a founder,
Hmm.
for a long time I've said, well, intelligence, problem solving, right? But that's
Yeah.
not even number one. Number one is emotional intelligence. And then I've also always said industriousness, like that execution, right? So a lot of people will agree on those three. But recently I was on another panel and this brilliant man said integrity.
Hmm.
And so that's actually the deal breaker. As
Hmm.
soon as I don't trust you, as soon as you've said something that didn't line up with what other people have said and validated, um, things that show up in your data room, in your deck, or you even kind of say something different to a different person in a different way. Um, once that trust is broken, once I
Hmm.
don't believe in your integrity, that's the deal breaker.
Hmm. That's so interesting. When we think of integrity, it's often referred to as table stakes, but sometimes where there is deviation, and it doesn't have alignment with the values of why the investor is investing in that company, when a deal breaker happens, like a trust diminishing, I'm sure that's a hard thing to come back from. And have you been in a scenario where it's like wondering whether or not there was just a misstep, or how do you work through if there are sort of deal breakers or there are changes in the way that you and the investors spend time with the founder? Or how are the ways that you look to ensure that you've got the full picture and that you're dialing in either a coaching scenario, with that bit of mentoring, and or revalidating some of the conditions that you all agreed on when you jumped into the this connection through the investing and being on their cap table?
Yeah. Well, that's where relationship building comes in, right? So you start with that point in
Yeah.
mind and you really get to know a person and you develop friendships, you develop things that, in maybe a normal like workplace where it's just here's your job, here are your tasks, and you do that. That's not investing, that's not early stage entrepreneurship. It is really about personalities, who you are, and we invest in a lot of young founders, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's not these kind of breaks in integrity are not always malicious. They are not
Mm-hmm.
always intentional. It could be absolutely, as you say, a learning moment, a coachability moment.
Yeah.
So I think like everyone needs to know their own line and their own comfort and themselves enough to see, well, is this someone I can work? Maybe it's an incredible company and it's just not a fit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying there should be so much more. It's not like Phoenix Fire and the Firehood are the be all end all. We need an ecosystem to thrive. We need different partners and different people with different perspectives. That's the whole point, you know?
Yeah.
So when we see that, it's like by knowing ourselves well enough to see, hey, this is the type of person who, you know what, if they falter, we have that space for them. We
Right.
have that understanding. We've seen enough to know that, well, that's a big question mark. And sure, there are egregious circumstances,
Oh, yeah.
and I've seen those too. And my impression of a lot of them are it's unfortunate, influences from others. Like it's not the person themselves that I know, it's that they're swayed, right? And they need to work on their own capabilities around leadership and being that person who brings everything together for this common cause of the
Yeah.
startup's progression, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
always about them having all the ideas or being able to do everything, right? They're the convener. And so they have to be a really good convener and they have to be able to take in all the inputs and draw the right output. And it's the same for the advice I give them, right?
Yeah.
It's an input, validate it, benchmark it, cross-reference, get your own opinion, and tell me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to hear it. So I think that's where those nuances come in, and
Right.
I think that's where the maturity of what we're building is not 3 years old. It's the lessons learned from fierce founders
I
and
bet.
my time at OCI. So I think that's a lot of where just the amount of exposure, it's at 10,000 hours, and we want to be outliers just like our entrepreneurs.
I love it. And I love that you really dove deep into that nuance. I think our listeners will extract value from that, of getting sort of into the psyche of an investor, and particularly the brand and the experience that you have. At the end of the day, it is a business. And so I love that you prioritize relationship building. I love that you prioritize disruption and being an outlier. But when we think of sort of de-risking business and your portfolio, can you talk to us a little bit about how you actually manage risk in the portfolio that you have, and times that you might have offered advice to a company to shift their business to de-risk so that your investment goes further, but more importantly, that their company grows with speed and with scale that you desire and that they desire?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's one where I think that's also where there's some where you have a deeper relationship than others, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes it's, hey, you're in like therapeutics. I don't have a lot of specialization in that. We are a sector agnostic generalist fund. So
Mhm.
I leverage a lot of external reviewers for our due diligence. And once we know that they're a winner, we can dive in, but we can also step back. And so I think it's that leniency around like what does a balanced portfolio look like? How do we manage risk? So maybe we're not investing in one sector or another to the extreme.
Mhm.
And therefore, we've got that availability for the ones where we can make an impact, right? But then we also step back for the ones that are just going to thrive. And when they want us, they can call us.
You had mentioned in our dialogue a little bit earlier, sort of a nod to the ecosystem. So let's talk about Canada's innovation ecosystem. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in the space, sort of indicators of change or trends that are lasting longer, but are perhaps a really good thing?
Yeah, I've seen people hone in a little bit more on their sector focus.
Hmm.
So whether it's AI, we know everyone's talking about AI right now, and less crypto, I've noticed. Right?
Yeah,
So there's always a new obsession. So the trend of that hasn't changed, but what it is has changed. So honing in on sectors, med tech, clean tech, um, and that refinement of theses. So people are very much like immediately, this is what we do. And I'm like, okay, great. Appreciate the forthrightness, but it doesn't leave a lot of room for creativity, that's for sure. So I would
right.
say that, and Canada overall loves its Series A B2B SaaS.
Hmm.
Um, and then one nice trend I've seen is the focus on sustainability, renewable energy, climate change, clean tech. We need to be at the forefront of this conversation, and so it's a matter of benefit for all humanity and the world. And so I'm glad to see that Canada is articulating that at a leadership level. I went to when I was in Colombia. It's the second most biodiverse country in the world. It's right there with Brazil. Like the Amazon's part of it, and the people that I met there who were all impact focused because Social Impact Ventures invited me,
Right.
really opened my eyes in a different network than I had a lot more exposure to because I'm deep in, venture capital territory in downtown Toronto. So that gave me hope and a lot of
Yeah.
learnings. And I think that the passion and the values are there, and we need to think about maybe some more innovation on the financial side. I mean, we're never going to be as, financially innovative as the US, but that means that there's proof points there that we can use as test beds to say we can do something more here. So those trends are feeding that, and I can see people who are doing it. So again, I feel comfortable in my niche as well.
Doing a sort of a look back and look forward. I love the trends you cited. What are some of the things that you're really excited about investing in currently? And when you think about what you've invested in recently, last 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, even your first round of investments, what are the things that you remain excited about from those early days, and what's the future focus of excitement?
Yeah, you know how excited I get about
I
everything, so
know.
there's no shortage. Um, yeah, I would say one thing that I've really noticed is the maturity levels of the ecosystems across Canada, but
Yeah.
also the entrepreneurs' experience as serial entrepreneurs. So even like their first failure, what they started with, like I'm still tracking everyone. So seeing them just go to, yeah, Series A, Series B is great, but when they start again, and
Yeah.
they're kind of in the trenches and they're not feeling great about starting again necessarily, right? Some people start again after a big win, and some people start after a big loss,
Yeah.
or something that can be semi-traumatic. I don't want to overuse that word.
Yeah.
um, and so I'm excited about those serial entrepreneurs, not
Hmm.
only in the ways that they can create new companies and what their ideas are and the maturity of their analysis and ability to execute, but also their ability to offer value to other founders, to reinvest. And it's a tragedy when someone doesn't come back into the
Yeah.
ecosystem. So we have to make it a supportive place for that too. We have to hold on to those, you know, the ecosystem. If you think of the ecosystem as like a brain, right? It's like those neural networks. And so finding those, and also those super connectors, right? So thinking about who those people are and then also seeing them grow over time. there's these precious people that we have that we need to nurture and maintain for
Hmm.
the entire integrity of everything. And so I'm seeing a lot of people come in and be ready for that, but I'm also uh, someone who will keep an eye on them and call
Yeah.
them and encourage them and give them a platform to do that. For example, one founder who had a massive exit, got her dream house or dream car, you know, no venture capital or angel investing. Everyone rejected her, their mistake.
Hmm.
And now she's a Firehood Angel. She called me yesterday. She's like, "Can I just use that title? Because I don't know what I'm going to be yet." I'm like, "Yes, please. It would be an honor." Right? Like they want to step back in, but they don't know where they fit yet, and they want to do those feelers. I'm like, I'm happy to be your entertainment.
Well, and especially if the pathway is different. That's an awesome story. What I also love is when you're thinking about people who are restarting, that even people who have a maturity about what innovation could look like, how it can actually change the world, when founders go back into that learning stage and they don't operate like they know everything, they have some experience based on building the first or second or third company. I find it so fascinating when you see a founder go back in and they go back to the basics and they go back into the learning and they open themselves up for the market is different now. The idea that I have that I'm going to build is going to impact differently than anything I've built before. I love that. And when I think of sort of the sustainability of our ecosystem, it's right in line with what you said of if it's such a shame, almost a trauma when we don't see people either getting back in after an incredible win or a failure, or not engaging in the way of investment and really activating that give first mentality in the way that others did for them when they were building. So I'm with you on that line of thinking. Anything more to add? Because I'm going to ask another couple of questions about a venture capital world, but I love kind of where we're going right now with sort of the sustainable focus on our ecosystem and how it requires people to get back into it.
I think one thing entrepreneurs have to realize about themselves is now they're addicted. Now it's too late for them
Yes.
already,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, when they're making decisions for their future about, oh, do I exit? Do I IPO? Should I be the CEO in the long term? What would
Yeah.
I do next?
Hmm.
It's like you're gonna build again. You can't help yourself. Like,
Yeah.
don't fool yourself.
That's the
And
trend of
so,
obsession.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
And so it was actually the CEO of Hopper who said it on a kind of fireside chat where he was like, I'd already exited. And then, I'm at Series B, Series C. I'm like, okay, what's next? It's like, I'm going to take this one and I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to go to that DEF series or whatever it takes because I know myself now and I know that I'm just going to build again. And why settle at that stage of growth
Hmm.
when you can actually continue? Especially if you're that level of leader. And so recognizing like where your limits are is one thing, right? It's great if you want to be that instigator, start things out, you like that part of the journey, and then there's someone who's going to operationalize and become that CEO. But if it's your baby and it's something that you want to keep going with and you want that and that's actually what's in your mind, be honest with
Hmm.
yourself and just it's tough, but keep going.
There's a ton of talk in our ecosystem about the things that Canada needs to do, the ways we need to change, the models we need to emulate. What I'd love to hear from you, because you have, again, such a positive energy, what's the thing you love about Canada's ecosystem?
We're so willing to give our time for
Hmm.
free.
Yeah.
I went to Dubai and it was like within the first or second conversation, oh, here's a bill. Oh, here's a bill. Oh, this is my agenda. I want, this insane amount from you, right? Like so many agendas and so
Yeah.
many asks and so much cost.
Hmm.
While as in Canada, there's a lot of sense of that kind of goodwill.
Hmm.
Hey, if I do this for you, I know that you'll repay me,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? It's like a small town across the country. And
Yeah.
so there are these unspoken expectations when you give something and you take something that it's reciprocated. And that's so valuable. And I think like you've seen me emulate that, right? You're like,
Hmm.
hey, come to my podcast. I'm like, I've got you, right?
Yeah.
If you really need me for something, you can ask, and I will get on that train to London, you know? So like
Absolutely.
it's
It's like the
it's that
karma credit. It's like we don't do it intentionally to build up karma credit, but at the end of the day, for every good deed and every way that we think as folks in Canada's ecosystem, really sometimes pushing the boulder up the hill and sometimes actually just watching people fly. The karma credit is such that for every good deed that we have, we know it's going to return tenfold. So I love what you've just said, and I have such similar belief of it will just continue to circulate if we continue to operate with that feeling of any good thing that I offer to a founder or an investor, some insight, working with the super connectors, bringing in the outliers, it returns tenfold for the benefit of the companies, for the benefit of Canada, for the benefit of people who are taking a chance on investing. And particularly when we think of first-time investors who are women, and they look at it from a viewpoint of some philanthropy combined with some business, and that experience for them, especially if they're connected to the Firehood and Phoenix Fire, and having that experience as an investor, how that actually can change the landscape. And so one of the things I'm kind of curious about from your perspective, and then we're coming close to time, is what is the focus, do you think, in the VC world now, and what do you think is going to radically change over the next 5 years?
I mean, VC is not really showing its stripes, unfortunately, overall. And so there were some recent golden years,
Yeah,
2021, 2022,
yeah.
you know, unintended expectations. But now with returns lagging,
Mhm.
with problems with, you know, the next round of financing, some of our
Mhm.
biggest funds folding, there will be a tougher slog for fundraising from LPs, continuing that growth, right? Once you're $1 billion fund, you don't want to go to a $500 million fund.
Right.
So how does that look? And what are the deals that will sustain the venture capital ecosystem?
Okay.
And so we need collective wins, not only for the state of venture capital, but for the economy of Canada.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
so where are they going to come from? Um,
Mhm.
right? And
It's the work that we've
we,
all got to do together.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So we like to end our podcast, asking about a bit of advice. So if I were to talk to young Danielle, and if you were to talk to young Danielle, what's the bit of advice that you would give to yourself way the way back, knowing where you were, where you've come, and the true impact that you're having? Is there any advice you give yourself?
It's always a tough question because it's like, you know, I think it would have been nicer to just lean in and do the entrepreneurial stuff right away. But
Hmm.
you have to value the journey as well
Yeah.
because I don't think I would have been able to write the proposals that helped me get through my ideas to funding without that arts background as well. So
Yeah.
I like that I took a more curated, balanced approach. I would say a lot of my journey has also been about finding the right partners. And
Hmm.
so I think feeling more confident in myself and the fact that it wasn't a weird, strange person who came from Africa growing up, you know, like it was cool. And, you know, Mean Girls had just come out. So I should have been like, yeah, this is awesome. And I started telling people more about that and they find it really interesting and they get to know me that way.
Yeah.
So, you know, at first I didn't like oversharing and people found it strange when they'd find that out about me like 6 months into our relationship, they'd be like, wait, you grew up in Africa? So I think that's emblematic of maybe sharing more of myself
Yeah.
sooner and letting people judge and then say, okay, you're not for me or you are for me, because then you find your people. And so
Absolutely.
I think that's, yeah, you got me thinking. I'm like expressing it right now, but I genuinely think that I shouldn't have been holding back from that. I should have,
Wow.
in order to fit in, I should have embraced these unique elements that now are what fuel me every day.
Well, and the sense of belonging that you have and the network that you create to create belonging. Um, I'm not entirely surprised by the answer that you just gave, because when I look at the adult version of you and the person who is successful and is having that kind of impact, having that story, you sharing that story today, really helps myself and our listeners understand how it is that you came to be and how it is that you started to grow your career in a way that has led you to be launching the Firehood and Phoenix Fire and having impact with companies. It's just really tremendous. And I thank you for joining us today and sharing really authentically your insight to the entrepreneur's journey and where you take chances and how you're taking those chances and de-risking and supporting folks who are building incredible businesses here and around the world. Our deep thanks to you for joining us today.
Thank you, Christina. I always love
Awesome.
Tech Alliance. We are very allianced.
We are. Yes, we are. So, Danielle, and to our listeners, the Idea to Investment podcast is actually sponsored by TD Wealth for our advisory group and is brought to you by Tech Alliance of Southwestern Ontario. And if you want to know more about Tech Alliance and resources that we have available to entrepreneurs and startups, feel free to go to techalliance.ca. My name is Christina Fox. Thanks so much for joining me.